Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're taking a close look at the experiences of Dan Harris, the network newsman whose intense career kind of unexpectedly led him down this path, exploring the world of meditation.
It's a really compelling journey, and our main source here is his book, 10% Happier, which is a very personal account of his whole transformation. What really grabs you right away is how it kicks off with that pretty dramatic and very public moment, his on-air meltdown.
Exactly. So our goal in this deep dive is, well, to understand what really set Harris on this path towards meditation, what he discovered, through some really interesting encounters along the way, and maybe most importantly, what practical insights you, our listener, might find useful.
Yeah.
It's really a story about moving from skepticism to a more mindful way of being. And it's filled with these surprising twists and like those aha moments we all kind of appreciate.
Definitely.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Let's start with that pivotal on-air incident.
Yeah, that feels like the logical place to begin. Harris describes it really vividly. This happened at ABC News right in Times Square while he was reading news voiceovers. The topic seems straightforward enough, something about statins, those cholesterol drugs, and cancer risk.
But things went off the rails pretty fast. He stumbled over his words saying this completely nonsensical phrase, cancer production.
It just paints this powerful picture, doesn't it? Someone so used to being in control on live TV, just losing it.
Oh, completely. It makes you wonder what was really going on underneath.
Yeah.
And as Harris reflects, this wasn't just some random slip. He connects it back to this whole period he calls mindlessness, a time when he was just completely driven by ambition and the, sheer excitement of climbing the ladder so fast at ABC News.
His early career was definitely impressive. He started co-anchoring World News Now, that overnight show. And then, incredibly quickly, he was filing stories for the main weekday World News Tonight with Peter Jennings.
Ah, Peter Jennings. Harris really looked up to him, even consciously tried to emulate his style. Yeah, he idolized him.
Jennings was clearly a huge figure for Harris. Sort of a mentor, but also, as Harris put it, sometimes a bit of a tormentor, always pushing him. Getting that network correspondent job so young was massive.
Huge. He wasn't expecting it for maybe another decade.
But that fast track, well, it came with its own pressures, didn't it? ABC News was known for being fiercely competitive.
Oh, yeah.
And then there was his father's motto, the price of security is insecurity. That definitely fueled this constant drive.
That kind of pressure, it often leads to imbalance, right? And Harris admits his work-life balance was, pretty much non-existent.
He prioritized work above almost everything, missing friends' weddings, family stuff.
Yeah.
All to be on air.
Then 9/11 happened, a huge global event, obviously, and he says it shifted his perspective somewhat.
Oh.
He felt this intense desire to be right there, covering these massive stories, especially working under someone like Jennings.
Right. And following that, his career took him into some incredibly intense environments or correspondence, places like Pakistan, Israel, Iraq.
Yeah, exposing him to significant danger and human suffering.
What's striking, though, is his initial reaction. He admits he didn't feel traumatized right away. It was more about the adrenaline being part of history.
Almost like a survival mechanism, maybe?
Could be. It's a very human admission, though, even if a bit unsettling. He's quite candid about how his own, self-importance and the professional competition sometimes overshadowed the gravity of what he was seeing. The drive to get the story, even in a war zone, it's paradoxical.
He's very honest about it.
And then, the tide starts to turn. He describes this descent, developing this weird, lingering flu-like illness after coming home, just constantly exhausted, achy.
And all the medical tests.
Negative, exactly. Which understandably leads to this really unsettling thought. He briefly wonders, am I going crazy? Is this all psychological? It's a moment of real vulnerability he shares.
And it's during this time, feeling so physically and mentally adrift, that he makes a really bad decision, self-medicating with cocaine. He talks about that initial euphoria, that temporary escape.
His friend Regina had a sharp term for it, his bright lights, big city phase. A stark contrast to the serious journalist persona.
He even acknowledges his denial about the risks. There's that anecdote about ignoring chest pains, a warning from a medical resident. He just walked out, pretended it didn't happen. Shows how powerful denial can be.
That denial, it eventually crumbled, culminating in that first very public meltdown on Good Morning America, filling in for Robin Roberts. Must have been incredibly humiliating.
He called his mom right after, backstage. She knew instantly something was wrong. Her response, though, part mom, part clinician, connecting him with a psychiatrist colleague, offered some comfort. But even then, he wasn't totally honest about everything.
Right. The partying didn't stop, and tragically it happened again about a year later, also on GMA. This time, even the Klonopin, the anti-anxiety meds he'd started, couldn't stop the panic, the struggle in his voice.
That second incident, even if less talked about, was the major wake-up call. He realized his career, the thing he'd sacrificed so much for, was seriously on the line.
His parents stepped in again, found him a new psychiatrist, Dr. Andrew Brotman, supposedly the best guy in New York for panic disorders. And in their first meeting, Brotman asked directly about drugs.
And this time, Harris finally admitted it, laid it all bare.
Yeah. And it was in Brotman's office that the full weight of his mindlessness, as he calls it, really hit him, connecting the dots, the relentless drive for airtime, the almost cavalier attitude in war zones, the drug use chasing that same adrenaline back home.
That realization marked the real start of psychotherapy. He describes the struggles, the cravings, ending friendships tied to drug use, difficult stuff. And Dr. Brotman's skeptical, really asshole look became this recurring thing in their sessions.
Classic Brotman, apparently.
But amidst all this personal turmoil, an unexpected professional assignment came up. Peter Jennings asked him to cover megachurches, something he'd put off. This led him to meet Pastor Ted Haggard in Colorado Springs, the Evangelical Vatican.
Haggard was huge then, massive church, very influential. But Harris saw him as part of a newer wave, trying to broaden the evangelical agenda beyond just gay marriage and abortion, almost into self-help territory.
Then a huge personal blow. The email about Peter Jennings having lung cancer. Harris never saw him again. Jennings died just months later. Despite their complex relationship, Harris felt deep affection and recognized Jennings' massive impact on his career.
Yeah, a really significant loss. Amidst all this, Harris is still navigating ABC News. After Bob Woodruff's injury, Terry Moran moved to Nightline, and Harris got offered the Sunday World News anchor spot. He saw it as a big step up.
And his coverage of the born-again scene continued. Haggard became a key inside source, giving him candid, off-the-record insights.
Even after Haggard's weird Hugo Chavez assassination suggestion, Harris kept in touch. Then, of course, the Mike Jones scandal broke. Haggard's downfall due to hypocrisy. Harris and his friend Wunbo apparently had a nuanced reaction, acknowledged the wrongdoing, but saw the human struggle too.
Then another unexpected turn, this time personal. A setup by Bob and Lee Woodruff led him to meet Bianca, a medical resident, and his first impression was, immediately positive.
Their relationship grew, though his workaholism and BlackBerry addiction were issues. Bianca eventually got him to move the phone away at night, and interestingly, he kept up that weird contact with Ted Haggard.
Yeah, he tells that surprising story of Haggard living in some dingy apartment in Arizona, selling insurance, wife Gail sticking by him. This actually led to Haggard's first network interview post-scandal, conducted by Dan Harris.
Harris called that interview a total mindfuck. Haggard swinging between brilliance and, ridiculousness. Profound insights 1 minute, bizarre pseudoscience the next. Must have been surreal.
Totally. Which kind of brings us to the next phase, his search for answers, leading him to these self-help gurus. His work anxiety was definitely growing. The whole news industry felt unstable. Jennings, Brokaw, rather all leaving.
He felt swept along, by habit, and increasingly saw how his ego played a role in his past messes. That's what drew him to Eckhart Tolle initially.
At first, he really felt like, okay, this guy gets me. But that faded fast when Tolle started making these pretty ludicrous claims about the present moment slowing aging, affecting molecular structure, thought frequencies.
Yeah, that stuff can be a bit much. And adding to the mix, he had surgery for basal cell carcinoma around then. Necessary, but probably an unwelcome distraction for someone on TV.
Definitely. But his interest in Tolle continued, and his colleague Felicia actually snagged an interview with him in Toronto. Tolle was apparently incredibly calm, even claimed he hadn't aged since his awakening at 29.
Right, but ultimately, Harris felt frustrated. Tolle identified the problem, the ego, but offered no practical solutions, so the search continued.
Next up, Deepak Chopra. Met him in Seattle during a weird Nightline debate about Satan, of all things. Chopra, the established guru, very adept at handling controversy.
Harris pushed him on living in the moment, especially in tough situations. Chopra's answers about separating from the situation, spontaneous right action, sounded deep, but were pretty vague. Not the practical advice Harris needed.
He tried sharing this new interest with Regina and his brother Matt. Didn't go over well. His brother gave him a sarcastic Eckhart Tolle calendar for Christmas.
Huh. Tells you everything. An interview with Chopra in Central Park didn't help much either. Harris challenged his imperturbability, but Chopra stuck to his lines about being engaged without stress. Harris remained skeptical.
He looked into Chopra's background, too, the Maharishi connection, the conflicting views on him. Ultimately felt Chopra, like Tolle, was this baffling mixtape. Some insight, some incomprehensible stuff.
This frustration, plus professional curiosity, led to the Happiness Inc. series on Sunday World News, exploring the whole self-help industry. This exposed him to even more figures, like Joe Vitale from The Secret.
Harris found that whole positive thinking message, in his words, gale force inanity, and noted a troubling blame the victim undertone. He even called Vitale out on some claims.
The series also covered the darker side, like James Arthur Ray and the fatal Sweat Lodge ceremony. Harris reported from Sedona, the New Age Vatican.
He met Brian Essad, a Ray follower still clinging to the law of attraction, despite financial ruin. Really highlighted the potential downsides. The whole exploration left Harris pretty disillusioned with self-help.
Yeah, definitely. After those largely unfulfilling encounters, his path took a major turn, thanks to Bianca. She gave him a book by Mark Epstein, introducing him to more grounded Buddhist thought.
And this book clicked immediately. He connected with Epstein's description of that selfish, childish protagonist, our inner dialogue, that constant judging, and the tendency to always seek the next pleasure without savoring the now. Does that resonate with you, that voice?
Oh, absolutely. It's that constant internal chatter, isn't it? Shortly after, Harris and Bianca got married on Harbor Island. He found it surprisingly joyful, really present, maybe a first taste of what he was seeking.
His meeting with Mark Epstein was pivotal. Harris, being direct, asked about radical transformation through Buddhism. Epstein gave a much more realistic view. You still feel all the emotions, even with practice.
They had a funny chat about personalities, too. Harris the extrovert, Epstein the introvert. Epstein reassured him it works for both, and crucially suggested other Jubu teachers, pointing out the lack of pricey gimmicks compared to self-help.
Still, Harris resisted meditation itself initially. He even quoted Alec Baldwin from 30 Rock, calling it a waste of time. His short attention span didn't help.
But then his psychiatrist, Dr. Brotman, recommended a book on the science of meditation's health benefits, written by a Harvard colleague. That evidence-based approach appealed to Harris's inner journalist.
The basic mindfulness instruction sounded simple enough. Sit comfy, feel the breath, gently return attention when the mind wanders, which it always does.
His first 5-minute attempt is hilarious and so relatable. Mind immediately floods with random stuff, shrubbery, weird smells, Rap Van Winkle gerbils. Shows how busy our minds are.
But that simple practice started changing his relationship with boredom. Those in-between moments, waiting in line, commuting, became chances to practice mindfulness.
Exactly. Which led him to grasp the core idea: awareness of thoughts and emotions without getting swept away. A huge shift from our usual reacting, wanting, rejecting, or zoning out.
He saw how he'd been blindly impelled by his ego, and mindfulness seemed like an alternative, creating space between stimulus and response.
Right. Distinguishing raw sensation from the stories we spin around it. He uses that waterfall analogy, mind like the rushing water, mindfulness, the space behind it. Nice image, but the practice is the challenge.
The next big thing, Diane Sawyer taking over World News, predictably triggered his "what does it mean for me?" anxiety.
He even used Woody Allen's dead shark analogy, gotta keep moving or you die.
The suggestion of moving to weekend GMA initially dismissed it as lateral, but then realized it meant more airtime, different audience connection, plus it's a big revenue driver.
So he started actively using mindfulness for this career anxiety, noting thoughts, allowing feelings without judgment, creating that mental distance. Another beer summit with Mark Epstein brought up Tara Brach, another key mindfulness figure, shows the ongoing dialogue within these traditions.
Then came that Caltech debate with Sam Harris, no relation, and Deepak Chopra. Sam Harris really went after Chopra's lack of scientific rigor. And crucially, Sam suggested Dan go on a meditation retreat with Joseph Goldstein.
Joseph Goldstein, a giant in Western Vipassana. But the idea of a 10-day silent retreat filled Harris with pervasive dread. He expected some cheesy New Age scene.
But he was surprised. Good food, lots of seemingly experienced meditators. The schedule, though? Intense. Hours of silent sitting and walking meditation daily.
He really struggled initially. Back pain, zero concentration during sits, felt totally like a rookie out of his league.
But then Joseph Goldstein gave a Dharma talk, basically a teaching on Buddhist principles, and it resonated. Goldstein's style was engaging, even funny about enlightenment. Harris connected, partly because Goldstein's background resembled his dad's.
Though later talks on rebirth, karma, nibbana. Less relatable for Harris. Not everything clicked immediately. His initial take on the retreat was blunt. Straight torture, son.
He had a private interview with Goldstein, though, which helped. Even asked about excessive saliva during meditation. Goldstein was comforting, shared a funny anecdote about his mom, human moments breaking through.
And Goldstein dropped that profound line, "That's the whole game," meaning the whole practice is just learning not to get carried away by your mind. That hit home for Harris.
He also resisted Spreng Washam's loving-kindness meditation, metta. For listeners, metta is Pali for loving-kindness, cultivating warmth toward self and others. Harris found it cloying, questioned his own generosity.
But during one metta session, thinking of his mom singing to his niece, he had this unexpected emotional breakthrough, a sob, a feeling of hyper-reality, a real turning point.
Goldstein also clarified dukkha, often translated suffering, but more like unsatisfying or stressful, that inherent sense things aren't perfect. Plus, hedonic adaptation, we get used to good things. The radical idea. Learn to be happy before anything happens.
Harris even found himself bowing to the Buddha after one meditation. Fleeting moments of heightened senses, rapture, followed by mundane struggles with sleepiness. Very real.
By day 7, he was antsy to leave. Eagerly reported his breakthroughs to Goldstein, who just listened patiently.
And here's a key lesson from Goldstein. Don't just tune out real-world thoughts post-retreat. Harris asked about practical stuff like missing his flight, the insight. Thoughts aren't the enemy. Mindfulness helps relate to them effectively, not be controlled by them.
Breaking silence on the last day was surprisingly normal. But back in the real world, he got blunt, discouraging career feedback from Jim Murphy. Interestingly, Harris reacted with newfound calm, thanks to mindfulness.
He still debated Murphy's assessment internally, ego fighting back, but signed the GMA contract, now facing morning TV's absurdity with this new toolkit, a contrast to his brother's external search for happiness.
Weekend GMA brought positive feedback, good relationships with co-anchors, but social media feedback, unfiltered, sometimes critical, a new challenge.
That's where mindfulness kicked in. Noting critical comments without getting hooked. Using Joseph Goldstein's mantra, "Is this useful?" But it wasn't a magic cure-all. His brunches with Mark Epstein reinforced that. Mindfulness mitigates, doesn't eliminate suffering. Epstein still experienced life's ups and downs.
This brings us to the science of mindfulness and, importantly, compassion. Harris learned about the military's interest, driven by research.
Yeah, studies show meditation helps with stress hormones, immune function, focus, test scores. John Kabat-Zinn was key in secularizing it with MBSR mindfulness-based stress reduction.
Brain scans show real changes. More gray matter in the hippocampus, memory and prefrontal cortex regulation, less activity in the amygdala, fear, and default mode network, that self-chatter. Harris felt a nostalgia for the present, less pointless self-talk.
This science helped him pitch Diane Sawyer a story on mindfulness. Led him to places like General Mills, interviewing researchers applying it in corporations like Jochen Reb and Janice Martirano.
Martirano challenged the myth of multitasking, talked about continuous partial attention, advocated single tasking and purposeful pauses.
And science backs that up. Pauses can boost creativity. Though Harris also realized even mindfulness language can become cliché.
Interestingly, even Diane Sawyer wanted to learn more about meditation. Shows its growing mainstream appeal.
But traditionalists like Mark Epstein worried about McMindfulness, a watered-down version potentially missing the crucial compassion piece central to Buddhism.
Harris admits he initially resisted the compassion aspect. Seemed like karma or reincarnation, less pragmatic. Mindfulness helped him, but becoming a saint wasn't the goal.
His interview with the Dalai Lama challenged that view. He saw the Dalai Lama's support for research, his response to the Tibet invasion, all embodying compassion.
And science shows compassion's benefits. Activates brain pleasure centers, improves health, makes people nicer. Richie Davidson's research, the Emory tape recorder study, fascinating stuff.
So hesitantly, Harris added compassion meditation, metta, to his routine. Traditionally, generosity and ethics precede meditation in Buddhism. The Buddha listed 11 benefits of metta.
His experience wasn't as dramatic as the retreat breakthroughs, but he stuck with it. Over months, noticed subtle shifts, more kindness, mentoring younger colleagues, a virtuous cycle, less negativity, better choices, more well-being.
He even saw a surprising side effect. Being genuinely nice was effective professionally, like unintentional manipulation. And ironically, Ron Artest changed his name to Metta World Peace around then.
But his compassion faced a test interviewing Paris Hilton, awkwardly asking about her declining celebrity. Didn't go well. A learning curve.
Which brings us to integration and acceptance. Ben Sherwood becoming his boss brought back memories. Ben was EP during Harris's first panic attack.
Still grappling with ambition, price of security versus acceptance, wisdom of insecurity. He proactively talked to Sherwood, addressing perceptions he wasn't a team. Showed maturity.
He highlighted stories he was proud of solitary confinement, Penn State, while admitting mindfulness is hard mid-stress.
Bianca offered sharp feedback on his rigid on-air presence, and Sam Harris suggested wisdom and compassion are achievable through practice, like Olympic training.
Sam even had a nuanced view on Tolle, suggesting sudden insight might happen without formal meditation. This prompted Dan to reread A New Earth, acknowledging its initial impact.
Today, Dan Harris co-anchors Nightline and Weekend GMA, valuing the freedom at Nightline. He credits his first readers for book feedback.
And the book offers practical pro tips: soft mental noting, in-out thinking, noting strong distractions, counting breaths, regularity over duration, guided meditations, finding buddies, really useful stuff.
He also recommends further reading. Salzberg and Goldstein on meditation, Epstein and Batchelor on Buddhism mindfulness. The core point remains. Neutralize the head voice. Cultivate non-judgmental awareness.
He includes instructions, too. Walking meditation, Salzberg. Body scan for sleep, Broch. Loving kindness, metta, Washam. That heart-based practice for self-love and compassion. And yeah, the news anchor we started with has clearly changed.
So, summarizing Harris's journey. Unexpected triggers like the meltdown and anxiety pushed him to seek change. Encounters with self-help were a mixed bag, often lacking practical solutions.
Right. Entertaining, but not deep enough.
It was really mindfulness and compassion, grounded and evidence-based, that offered a real path.
Exactly. And that 10% happier concept is key, isn't it? It makes it accessible, realistic, not aiming for instant enlightenment, just tangible improvement.
Yeah, definitely. Which brings us to you, the listener. Think about that voice in your head, the constant commentary, the worry. Is it always helpful?
Probably not always.
What if you could create just a little space around those thoughts? Respond with more awareness, maybe more kindness to yourself and others.
It's worth considering. Exploring mindfulness and compassion as tools, maybe finding your own 10% happier. It's about navigating those inherently unsatisfying bits of life a bit better.